Welcome to Athlete Complete, where we host raw and open conversations about the details that impact performance from current and former professional athletes for parents, players, coaches, and fans.
This will be good.
And we're back. Let's dive into it, fellas. Ceremonial sip of the coffee.
Yep, let's go.
I don't know who decided that we were going to be recording these at 8 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, but that's what we're doing. And so it's fresh, it's new, it's a brand new day every time we record. And that's why Brad Evans always looks like he's half asleep.
Or not here.
Or not here today. We're going to dive into some territory today that's, it's obviously timely and relevant and delicate. And I was trying to think about what are some ways that we can talk about injuries that aren't so heavy and tense. And so I took a look at some of the most iconic injury comeback stories because I think those are kind of fun. And the ones that jumped out to me when you think about, and I'll give you guys a second to think about, in your life, which injury like comebacks are the most iconic? And I'll start. I remember being, 11 or 12 years old watching the Olympics, and Carrie Strug had like a broken ankle, I guess. And they wrapped it up really tight and they talked to her and they're like, you got to make this pole vault. And so she went out or it was a pommel horse. And she ran out and she had this like funky gait because her ankle was busted and she stuck the landing and won gold. And that was like blew my mind because it's just like etched in my brain that the body and the mind can do incredible things despite incredible adversity. And so that was the one that kind of stuck out to me. When I think about injury comeback stories, what's one that jumps out to you guys?
Man, there's so many, like so many times guys come back from injury or girls come back from injury and do something amazing, I think the hard part is that not everyone gets the comeback story, the happy ending. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're few and far between.
Yeah. It's kind of like you're hoping to be that story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to kind of be one of those, coming back from Tommy John. I'd been out for, I forget what they said. It was like 800 and something days that I hadn't been on a big league mound. And then I went back out and pitched last season. And that was probably my biggest comeback. I've come back from a lot of injuries, but that was my longest time away. And it was tough, man. There's nothing cool about it. It's a grind, but it's amazing to watch people come back in those big situations and do something huge, and you've seen people come out that are still kind of hurt. Remember Kirk Gibson hitting that home run in the World Series?
Yeah.
Running around the bases, kind of limping, stuff like that. That's
sort of running. Yeah.
That stuff's stuff like that's the stuff that you kind of remember,
Ben, what's one that jumps out for you?
Well, there's a few. I mean, that's a big question, right? And Carrie Strug's pretty famous. I used to have this NBA VHS tape, and then there was a guy named Willis Reed who played for the New York Knicks, and in the tape it highlighted him going into the locker room injured and coming back out to a standing ovation and limping up and down the court, but making shots and all this stuff. Then my brain also goes to Michael Jordan playing sick. I know that's not quite an injury, although, depends on how you define injury, but having those type of games. Then I go to weird spots in my brain, which is, for you guys, you understand, that's my normal spot. Ronnie Lott, who played for the 49ers, I think he dislocated his finger, and then at halftime they just chopped it off, or chopped up part of it, and he went back out there. I'm sure he was injected with some other stuff to make him not feel much, but shit like that, which is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But then there are these. James nailed it. This is a common thing that happens all the time that people don't get credit for. And you look at what James overcame, I mean, years off the mound and still able to get back and get to the big leagues and perform the way he has, is inspiring. Even Matt Boyd just got back out there after TJ, and these are personal stories that are relevant to me. He got a standing O for what he did with Cleveland, which was really, really cool to see. For me, I wasn't able to overcome my injuries, so to watch these guys do it is it's wow, what strength.
Yeah.
Because I understand the psychological toll, and they've overcome it. I didn't. I had to work at it. But yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff.
Some of the other ones that kind of jump out at me was like Peyton Manning's neck fusion, that neck injury.
Yeah.
Then he went to Denver, made it to the Super Bowl. He got spanked, obviously, by the Seahawks. But that to have the mentality like, okay, I'm gonna have my neck fused, and then I'm still gonna go play. I'm gonna go play, probably the most injury prone sport in the world. Maybe MMA is closer, but the fact that you get a freaking neck fusion and you're like, nah, I'm going to find a way to work back from that. Just like that mentality absolutely blows my mind. And it's super inspiring. And it's also probably a little crazy, right? Like what is that? What is that like razor's edge of, no, I repair like Wolverine. I'm going to go back out there. I've got this drive. I'm going to be okay. Versus like, no, man, you should probably not play anymore because of this injury is so serious or so impactful to your potential quality of life in the future. You get hit in the right spot one time and you're looking at like quadriplegic level. And it's just, it's such a part of sports. It's such a part of, and I think because it's part of sports, it's a part of culture. And we all, in all of our sporting careers, have injuries. Like I've got an elbow injury from high school football that still messes with me. And I played football for 3 years in high school. And it's like these little tiny things. So I went and looked at some other ones, like the Conor McGregor broke his ankle and then stepped down on it and it curled out on him. He found his way back and now he's making movies and buying bare knuckle boxing, sporting organizations. But this is going to be a fascinating conversation, not only because of the timeliness of it, James, but also because of the work that you do, Ben, in helping people come back from injuries. So I want to start with this question, which is,
well, before you get into that, I think just to piggyback off what you're saying, you got to look at the word strength and resilience and kind of define those things and understand that those are inherently individualistic metrics that need to be defined to the person. So for some people, true strength is like, yeah, you worked back and you got back on the mound and you did this thing. Other people, true strength is acknowledging that this is a really bad idea and that I shouldn't do this anymore because the risks are just not worth it. So like Chris Carson, someone I worked with, running back from the Seahawks, his neck was so messed up that you take another hit the wrong way, man, you're not walking anymore. And to have the strength to go, not worth it. When it goes against everything that you've been trained, like every cell in your body saying you have to do this because this is who you are, that takes a lot of strength too, And then we're talking about injuries, I know that, but like people who get over their psychological issues and start persevering and performing, I think that's a major thing to celebrate. People who turn their life around, people who are on drugs and are able to get through that side of their life and perform. I mean, I think this is just such a broad topic that injury isn't just the mechanical thing. It's there's so many facets to it that we have to kind of celebrate and yeah, I don't know. That was my thought bubble that I followed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just a torn ACL, MCL, meniscus. It is a disruption to your life. It is a potential risk of, pain pill addiction. It is a from a monetary perspective and from an organizational perspective. It puts pressure on the team, on the organization, on the bottom line. I mean, there's so much because the stakes are high, right? When you're playing at an elite level, it's not just like, oh, my knee's funny. It's like, no, there's a ripple effect. And the irony of this is not lost on me because James is injured and it happened a few days ago. And so to be having this conversation right now, you know,
which also takes strength.
right, absolutely right. Like, I don't know shit about this. I read things and I watch TV. I've had injuries. I know people who have been injured. What are you going through right now, James? Like, what's going on for you?
Well, I think one of the hard things for athletes is like it's an attack on your identity, right? When you get hurt, because like a lot of us identify as the sport that we play. We've been doing it since we were 8, 5, 10, whatever, whenever you started. So for me, it's been 25 years, and I think I've told you guys that like this is my last season. I'm going to be retiring after this year, and I to go out injured, it's tough. I mean, like limping off the mound for the last time is not really how I envisioned being done. And like pitching for the last time, but I guess it's sort of like fitting for my career. I've had a laundry list of injuries in my career. I've come back from every one of them. I've been extremely fortunate to work with great people and guys like Ben, and they've helped me get back to that peak performance. But I think it's even harder this time because I know that this is it. I'm going to try and get back before the end of the season, but I mean, I don't think my chances are real high of getting back out there. I mean, I'm still on crutches at the moment, and I'm like limping around. Unless I make like a big turnaround, I'm probably not going to make it back out there, and that'll be all she wrote for me, and then I think the real work starts with like dealing with my identity and stuff like that, and working on what it's going to be like to not be a Major League Baseball player anymore. So that's tough, and I think it's harder knowing that like that's it. So people that get hurt and it like takes them completely out of their sport or puts them in a position where they have to decide, like, hey, I think I have to be done because it's too dangerous for me to go back out there. I think that's even harder because sometimes when you get hurt, you just kind of go into this mode, and I'm not saying it's a healthy mode of just like obsession with getting healthy, and you do absolutely everything. You probably overwork yourself, but you pour everything into it, and you make it back out there, but it sacrifices the people in your life, and I think that it's really hard to find that balance when you're injured. It's easier when you're playing, to find that balance in your life. But when you're injured, sometimes you can just get so laser focused on your rehab. I know I did it, and I think there's better ways to do it. Where you are a bit more balanced in your life and maybe in a better place mentally. But it does take a lot of focus to come back from an injury and be mentally prepared to be in a place to compete when you get back.
This is such a unique opportunity. And, obviously it takes a ton of courage to just show up today and have this conversation. And I want to just like appreciate and honor the fact that you're here and that you're open to talk about it. And also I want to capture this golden opportunity because you're obviously such a stand-up guy, James. And I'm trying to think about what people are curious about, baseball fans, the people in Boston, the people in Seattle, the people in LA who, people from your hometown that have been following your career for such a long time to now be here on Tuesday, August 20th, 2024, just a couple of days after you limped off the mound. What's the hardest part of this?
the hardest part is that I'm not going to, like, if I don't make it back this year, I'm not going to pitch again. You know, I'm not going to be on a big league mound and be competing and doing the thing that I love to do. You know, I'm choosing to go home and be with my family, and that's great too. You know, like that brings me a ton of joy, and I love my family, and I know that they need me. You know, and I'm excited about a lot of things that come with retirement, and being with my family more. At the same time, you know, I'm giving up something that I've been doing for the last 25 years, and it's basically all I know. You know, I've made all of my decisions, you know, for the last 25 years have had baseball to consider, you know, and it's weird. It's a weird feeling to know that, you know, I'm not going to go to spring training next year, and I'm not going to be training all off season to be ready to compete at the highest level. Um, and I'm sure I'm going to be a little bit lost. You know, like I'm not going to really know what to do with myself a lot of the time. Luckily, you know, I've got stuff like this. I've got the podcast. I've got athlete complete stuff to do to keep me busy and keep my mind going. Um, but yeah, it's gonna be weird, man. And you know, getting hurt like I did, I made it. I think I made it like 22, 21 games this season that I pitched in a row, which is quite a few for me. You know, I've had a lot of injuries in my career. I think that the most games I've pitched in a season is like 26, maybe. Um, and that was quite a while ago. Probably like, oh man, 2019, I think is probably the last time I pitched like 25, 26 games, something like that. Um, but I think that I'm trying to be grateful for everything that baseball has, you know, taught me, you know, and everything I've learned from the game. You know, it's kind of been, I think, preparing me for what's coming next in my life. You know, which I think is helping people. I think that if I had had a different career, maybe the career that I wanted or I was chasing, you know, was you know, if I'd staying healthy and, you know, signing that big contract and getting a long-term deal somewhere, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of what I envisioned and what I wanted, but I don't think that would have prepared me for what I think is probably my true calling, which is what's coming next, is helping people and kind of doing the whole mental health, sports psychology piece of sport. You know, I think I'm really passionate about that, and my career path in baseball has, I think, prepared me for that next chapter.
Are
It's
you?
great.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Well, it's interesting because the transition is such a difficult thing no matter what. And you transition all the time in life. I mean, even just transitioning markets that you're playing in is a new challenge, and you have to get normalized with what you're doing, new processes and all that kind of stuff. But some of the work I've done with the MLSPA, taking a course in transition. Melinda Harrison, who I'll connect you with, is phenomenal. She's out of Canada, and she was an Olympian in the '92 Olympics for Canada. She was a swimmer, and she described it as a hero's arc, hero's journey, where you think your peak level's at really is just the beginning, and then you have to go back down and through these rough patches and through this kind of messy in between phase, and then the arc goes back up even higher to your personal next best, which is what you're going to be going through right now. And if it weren't hard, it would be something that you would need to question about what you just did. If you
Mm-hmm.
weren't sad about it, you'd need to question about what you just did. Like those are totally normal feelings. For me personally, I didn't even get that far. I just was done before I'd even started. It was a flash, you know, like injury set me back and I was done. And I couldn't get over the mental humps that came with it without going through some pretty dark phases personally, which again, like you, I'm using it now to help people. Like I'm using those experiences. I'm using some of my perceived low points to educate and train and guide people into the next phase of what they're doing. Not to keep them from experiencing it, but just to prepare them from an expectation standpoint that this could happen. You could feel this. This is normal.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, some of the stuff that you're feeling or other people have felt may not be normalized from how you're trained. Like they're like, no, I'm feeling weak right now. It's like, no, this is a totally normal situation you're in right now. This is what you're feeling is totally normal, and
Hmm.
you'll get out of it because this is a fleeting moment in your time chart, and you're going to come out of it in a better spot because already your mentality about it is higher than most people have. You're in a better spot.
Well, I've had a lot of
So
practice.
and but that's also a valuable thing to take away from this is that yeah, you've worked on the mental side for years now. And so, yeah, your relationship with this whole thing is a little bit different. And
Hmm.
you are in a position to take skills from what you just did and help other people with it.
Hmm.
If you hadn't been preparing yourself and hadn't been training yourself and working with Seth and everybody else, you would be in a different spot. This could be a massive derailer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was in a derailed spot. I mean, I was okay. I'm going to go ahead and drink and cope with it that way and then tell people I'm still training. Like that's obviously it's not the same thing. You're in a much externally healthy spot. I mean, I can't speak about what's going on underneath the skin, but it's pretty cool, dude.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I'm trying to hold it together. I think that like it's one of those things where you've got those two different voices in your head, right? Like there you've got the negative and then you've got the response to the negative. Um, and I think the more times that I respond in the way that I want to be thinking, the the less often those negative voices come in. They don't. It's not like they're stopped. I still have those negative thoughts. But I think I know how to respond to them, and that's kind of like what I just said to you guys is like how I want to take this is like that it's preparing me. This has been my journey. This is what's preparing me for what's next. And then there's that side of me that's like sorry for myself and like, oh, what it could have been, all that kind of stuff. And that doesn't help me. It's just, but those thoughts are there. They're real. But I have to have that response to those thoughts so that I can continue moving forward. And I think, the more times I respond to it, like I was saying, I can kind of get those thoughts come in, further and further in between.
What's it like? Do you have to insulate yourself a little bit from the outside world so that like do you read articles, do you respond to texts from your third cousin, do like what is that process of managing or dealing with the sort of outside world that wants to either come in and say, hey, you're going to be fine, man, you're good, we'll see you back on the mound? Like, do you read tweets? What's that process of managing external stimuli during this process?
Um, I'm definitely like getting messages. I haven't really like announced that like I'm retiring. There's a few people that are close to me that know. Um, but I think that the people that are just kind of like on the fringe, it's very like short answers. It's just like kind of give them the basics of like, oh yeah, I'm doing, it sucks, but I'm gonna see if I can make it back, kind of thing. I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna see if I can make it back. It's kind of like where I leave it. You know, Whereas the people that I'm closest with, I'm like, yeah, I don't know how this is gonna go. I kind of get a bit more deep. I actually like share a bit more about like how I'm feeling, um, and maybe a bit more like realistic. Like it's a small percentage chance that I like make it back, and it's probably more like if we make the postseason, like I could maybe make it back and come out of the bullpen kind of thing. Um, but we'll see. I think that the hardest thing for me right now is the whole retirement, piece of it. That like I'm not going to be fighting to get back to the mound. I'm going to be fighting to get healthy again so I can like walk and like be active. Um, but I'm not fighting to like once the season's over, like I won't be fighting to like get back on the mound. I think the it's hard for me when some of my friends are like, "Oh, dude, you can still do it. Like you're still having success, Like, do you think you could still go out and be successful?" I'm like, "Yeah. Like I know that I could go out and pitch next year and help a team win." you know. But I'm choosing to be done, to go do what my family needs me to do, which is be there. You know, my kids need me around, my wife needs me around. I've had a long career. You know, I've been doing this for 10 years, or longer. And my wife's been with me the whole time. She's been gritting through it. She's not your typical, you know, athlete wife that's at every game, that kind of stuff. She doesn't love baseball, you know. So she's kind of been grinding through this thing with me, and I know that she's ready to be done. And my kids want me around. My son, right now I'm gone. You know, I'm in Boston. They're back in Seattle, and he wakes up at night crying, saying, "Dad, come home. I miss Dad." You know, and that's tough, man. Like, you know, your kids are the most important thing in your life, and your family and your wife, and you know, I'm just ready to be there for them, and I'm making that choice to be done, even though I know that I can still compete at the highest level and be successful. Um, and that's still, like, even though it's such a pull to be with my family, and like that's sort of like a thing that's always going to win. It's still hard to give up your sport, and for me to give up baseball, you know. But I've looked at it like when I've been choosing baseball my entire life, I've sacrificed a lot of things. You know, I've sacrificed time with my friends, time with my family, experiences, you know, and now I'm just making the opposite sacrifice. You know, I'm giving up baseball, but I'm going to get all this stuff back. You know, time with family, time with friends, you know, the ability to go snowboarding again, you know,
Yep.
spend
Nice.
time in the summer with people, and go on fishing trips in the summer instead of freezing in the winter in the snow, fishing, that kind of stuff, you know. So there's all kinds of great things about being done. And I'm just trying to be grateful for the experience that I've had in baseball and all the lessons that I've learned. Like we were talking about earlier about coming back from injuries, and I'm handling it better this time. And I feel like I'm handling it better because I've come back from, I don't even know, Ben, what is it, like 12 injuries in my career? Like,
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah, I've got a laundry list, man. It's more, I've had more injuries than years played in Major League Baseball. Um,
Can you walk us through those a little bit?
I don't even know if I can remember them all, honestly, but like I've had a lat. I tore my lat. I tore my pec. I strained my forearm. I got Tommy John. I got a cyst in my back. I pulled my calf. I tore the A4 pulley in my finger. Um,
What does that one do? What does the A4 pulley do?
that makes it so you can go like this. It was basically like when I bent my finger, there was a little line that would go from here to here, because the A4 pulley is like a little, like, it's almost like a fishing rod, you know. And you got the loops. It's like a loop broke, and I couldn't move my finger. And the fishing rod was broken, so the string would kind of go from like here to here instead of being like go around the rod. Um, so that one took a while. My fingernail fell off after that, and I had like no fingernail. Uh, Man, I'm trying to remember if there's any others. Hamstring, pull my hamstring. I've done the lat twice. Um, what else? I had a knee thing one year. It was like a knee. What was it? Like my
You still have the knee thing.
ACL. I still deal with knees, but I've learned how to, you know, get around that. Um, yeah, man. I don't know. I don't know if I've got them all, but that's quite a few of them.
Wow.
Yeah,
And the
it's been
interesting thing about the interesting thing is you've came back from all that stuff, and you know, depending on the framework, people are going to go fragile, or
hmm
you can go resilient, and it's a choice there. And I'm going to go resilient for sure. And you're in with the best organizations in the world of any sport. I mean, the teams that you've played for, and they still don't have it figured out on how to maximize an athlete and train them correctly, because this is it's not like you didn't take care of yourself, right? You know, it wasn't like
yeah,
it was a you problem. This stuff just happens. I mean, this is the thing about sports that we got to start wrapping our head around. They are inherently not healthy.
yeah. You
It's
know,
just not it's not
yeah.
healthy to do. It's a
It
high
wasn't a
risk.
yeah. It wasn't a lack of effort thing.
No.
Like if anything, I'm the guy that works too hard.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that injury is just part of the game. I think some people are extremely lucky to go through their careers and never get hurt or have very few injuries. I think
Bingo.
that injuries are just happen. They just happen, and dealing with them is extremely hard. And it's an attack on your identity. People think you're soft or breakable. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten comments on Instagram posts, saying, "Oh, you're made of glass and you're so soft, you're weak," all this kind of stuff. Um,
From the guy
but
who tears his Achilles playing basketball with his buddies, and he's a
right,
fat, chubby piece of shit that doesn't know anything.
Right.
yeah, exactly.
Plenty of those
So
guys.
yeah,
There's a lot of
plenty,
those guys.
yeah, plenty of armchair athletes.
That
But
was a nicer way to say that.
but
Everyone's brave behind a computer screen. Like they got to
yeah,
trust me. If they ran into you and you're 6'5" standing in front of them, I don't think they're going to say the similar
Yeah.
things. You know. And I mean,
yeah,
the new research shows like once you start getting these injuries, your body and your nervous system has a PTSD effect, and what that looks like is diminished motor control or lower thresholds for motor control. So your body learns a new way to do something, but that might be less than optimal. So
mm,
it's not easy to dig out of that, and these are real physiological responses because we're here for survival, not for pitching. And so your body's trying to create a new lane, a new pathway for you to do something that doesn't match up with the torque requirements that you're trying to do. So
yeah,
it's really really a difficult thing, and you nailed it earlier. You said guys get through their career without injury. Lucky, lucky.
mm,
Not superhuman anything. Super duper duper lucky.
yep,
And that's the reality. It's more often than not, it's not that case. It's the other way.
right,
So
If I pry into the nitty gritty of the sort of physiological process that goes along with an injury, Ben, you're uniquely suited to explain some of this, which is if something happens in my right shoulder, it's affecting my left hip. If something
mhm.
happens in my right knee, it's my left IT band or whatever. Is there a sense that I know it's person to person specific, but is there a sense that these either small or medium sized injuries lead to a chain of compensation that then leads to additional injuries either next week or next year or further down the road?
Yeah, I mean it's uh, there's definitely there's pathways and there's communication pathways that we got to take into consideration. So you damage a shoulder, yeah, that left hip or something could show up, which is going to ultimately affect the kinematics of what you're trying to do and your output at that point. The other thing we really got to look at is mood states and psychological states and what your relationship is with those injuries, because mood's going to be a huge predictor for injury risk and performance decrements. So again, we can just keep reverse engineering this conversation to how does it tie up into what you identify with and what you value. Because if you value what you do on the field and not who you are as a person, then an injury is going to be a much bigger deal than if you had a different set of value sets.
Is that
So
I want to dig into that a little bit because when you talk about mood states, is that really what you're talking about? Is just like how you see yourself? Is it
yeah,
is it about like do you meditate or is it do you overcompensate in that recovery? Like is like when you say mood, what do you really mean?
yeah, your psychological state and how you view yourself. What is your body view and what do you think is going on there? Because I've said it before on this podcast, we are a system of interrelated systems, and that includes your cognitive self. And if that is struggling or if it's wrapped up into something, it's going to affect other things. And if you assault that by getting injured, yeah, you're going to go into a depressive anxiety state, and that's going to lower your motor control and your nervous system output, and that's going to make it much more difficult to come back from an injury than if you had a indifferent mindset about it. If you were a little bit more calm, and this shows up this goes back to the whole idea of what's happening at youth sports and ingraining these identities with these kids into their sport and how they achieve. And then when they get injured, because they're not even emotionally stable enough to handle it all, you're causing really big problems for these kids that already have enough on their plate to deal with. You know, and they don't have real repercussions at it. James has real repercussions. That's his job and his family and how he takes care of his people. Like that's a real fucking thing, right? Kids stuff isn't. You're playing a game, hopefully. Like these are a different set of circumstances, but I mean, there's a lot of clear research on number one predictor for re-injuring your ACL if you tear it is a lack of confidence. Nothing else. It's not the mechanical side. It's the confidence side.
Wow.
That's the hardest thing to get over is like when you are like quote unquote healthy again. Like let's say you tear a muscle. Let's just say it's my calf, right? We're talking about my calf right now. Say it's fully healed, but it's that subconscious, that mental. Like I can go back to being extremely explosive on this, having that confidence to explode off of my calf. You know, that's I think what Ben is talking about is like, do you have that slight hesitation or that like, are you not going to move super efficiently so that you can, move like in the most healthy way kind of thing? It's sort of like it's like he's talking about. It's that confidence to fire your muscles at peak performance and for your muscles to respond optimally. It takes the mental side of it too. I think that's the hardest part for injuries is coming back and being able to go at that 100%. You kind of come back and you're comfortable going like 90, but 90 doesn't get it done in professional sports. You can't go 90%. It takes 100% of everything you've got to go out there and be successful.
Which is a big part of the challenge as well, because if you're looking at how you define stress, and I mean, if you ever ask yourself that how one day this minute task is stressing me out, the next day it's not bothering me one iota. Have you ever experienced something like that? It's appraisal of the demand of a task or what you need to do, plus your resources available. So if you're low on your resources because you have so much external stress going on, or the threat level is much higher, so I need that extra 10% to do my job well, otherwise my family doesn't eat well. That's a much higher stress score than what should be, like, in a normal circumstances. That's why it's really, really difficult for your brain to let that go and get that last 10%, because it's like, if I hurt this again, the threat is like really high. I got serious repercussions here. And then that's at the pro level, but if you're going down to the youth sports level, the threat shouldn't be that high. You should be in an okay space, psychologically safe, have a great support network from family, coaches, and club to go, okay, we're going to recover this appropriately. We're going to ease you back in. This isn't going to affect your college recruiting status. It shouldn't. You're not a letdown for the team. I've got kids that have been playing for some of the top clubs in the area since they're 10, and they get injured when they're 17, and it's total overuse accumulation, and they don't understand why they're getting hurt. Like, I've been doing this since I'm 10. I've been training this much. Like, well, you're getting hurt because you've been training this way since you're 10.
Right.
But you just nailed it. It's not, let's be clear there. And then they go to their practice and their coach goes, oh, you're hurt again. What do you think that does to somebody? Now they're letting down their team. They don't think they can accomplish what they're supposed to accomplish, what they've been training for. And just like the psychological state is just in the tank. And that's the environment we're creating at the younger levels. Mm-hmm. Pro sports, you sign a contract, you're doing something different. I mean, that's the reality. The high risk, high reward. That's what it is, right?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just crazy because I look back at my career and same as James. Hard work was not a problem. Hard work is how I achieved to get to where I got to. But then I underperformed when I got there because I didn't develop psychologically enough and mature enough to sustain it. Like, I didn't have the, I guess maturity is the right word, or the education to go, okay, let's start playing the long game here. How do we manage ourselves more effectively? Then an injury happened, threat. oh, I'm going to outwork this problem. Nope, can't do it. Oh, guess what? You're a failure. You're not good enough at what you're doing. Uh, Teams just dissolve your contract. Now where am I at?
I
Mm-hmm.
think of this sort of inverted graph of like, as my mental health declines because of this injury, my injury gets worse, and then I
Yeah.
get more depressed, and then my injury takes longer to recover from. It's just, is that that's what I
The
picture?
hole gets deeper. The hole gets
Yeah.
deeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had surgeries that repaired my damage, but I had the exact same pain long after the surgeries. And I mean, there's pain science that goes into that, but the pain went away when I chose to focus on a different career.
Mm-hmm.
Pain came back when I went back into those environments, by the way.
Well,
So like when
I want to dig into that a little bit because you're still striking soccer balls
yeah,
very regularly, right? And some
hmm
of your injuries have come from striking soccer balls. As a goalkeeper coach, you're constantly striking the ball at full velocity using that same motion with your dominant leg, plant leg, swing. You're still doing that. You're still striking soccer balls weekly. You're still maybe it's at full velocity, maybe not. Like your injuries stemming from that repeated use, do those still come up for you?
yeah, I have that pain, but for me the threat's not as high. So if I feel something, I'm like, is this going to get worse? Is it something that's going to affect much? And right now, no, not in my life, because if I don't kick a soccer ball, I don't care that much. I can do it different ways, and I can coach differently, so I don't have to be the one doing it. Even when I started coaching at a young age, my ego was still wrapped up in look how well I can kick this ball. So I wanted to do all that stuff because it gave me joy. I really enjoyed doing it, but I was also like, I'm pretty good at this thing, so I'm going to do it versus delegating it and sharing the load. Now that's changed. So like again, it goes back to my psychological view of what it is I'm actually doing first, and then the physical side. So yeah, I still have pain, but it's a different relationship with it, and it doesn't derail me. I mean, I used as a player, I used to have anxiety dreams, and I'd pull my muscles while I was sleeping. Like that's when I knew I was in big trouble. I was in Austin, Texas, and I had a dream about training the next day, and I kicked myself awake, and I pulled my groin.
Oh my god.
And like even thinking about that makes me emotional because I woke up, I was crying, I was devastated. I'm like, I don't know what to do here.
Man, that's a tough place to be.
Yeah, it was weird. So the more and more I've done research on all this stuff, yeah, I've gone pretty far down the physical side of things, but the mental side and the relationship with it and the environments that you're in, are they supportive or are they pressuring you or whatever else? That stuff is critical. If you want to work with the individual and get them back into where they want to go, your environment for them needs to be correct as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to assume that organizations are, even if you have a sports psychologist, even if you have, one of your physios who's really adept at managing the mental side, this is still uncharted territory, right? Like,
Yeah, and it goes so much further than that because a sports psychologist usually is someone who doesn't really get it. I mean, they have. I apologize for saying that. Uh, they haven't been in the fire though, to a certain degree. I
likely
think
not.
There's more that are coming out that definitely have, but and sometimes players don't need that. They need a coach that's supportive. They need a family that's supportive. They need something. They need like the whole ecosystem to know how to support you the right way. Like that's if you're in a club like that, you hang on for dear life because that's a great spot to be. And I don't know how many of those exist.
Can you think of one?
No, because I don't have enough in-depth knowledge. But
Hmm.
it seems like from being able to look again from a million miles away, maybe Klopp from Liverpool created an environment like that. I'm assuming. James, do you have experience
Yeah,
like
I was just thinking about that when you're talking about it. I think there's teams that do an okay job, but you know, no, you're not getting it from all angles. Everyone's too focused on their own thing. It's really hard to be a professional athlete. So like teammates, they'll come by and like say something like, "Oh man, I'm sorry, that really sucks," that kind of thing. But like, you know, everyone's so focused on the ultimate goal still on a team. You know, everyone's focused on getting to the postseason or, you know, doing their own thing, winning the game today. You know, in baseball, there's a game every day. So it's like you get to the park and everyone's thinking about the game today. They're not thinking about you, you know, and your injury. You're just kind of like a spare part over here, just kind of like getting fixed in the shop. You know, they're worried on they're thinking about worried about the ultimate goal, which is, you know, winning today's game. So it's hard to just kind of feel. That's how I think you kind of can feel invisible, you know, when you're hurt, is because you're not a part of that anymore. You're not a part of that battle, that fight to win that game that day, and that's difficult. You know, I think that somewhere I wanted to go with this conversation was like talking about stories. You know, because everyone lives by telling themselves a story, right? Like, what story? What's your story? You know, you kind of and you can choose. You know, if you just kind of let the world choose a story for you, or like you're talking about, if I let the articles that I read or the comments on Instagram, you know, create my story, it's going to be a pretty dark, negative story.
Hmm.
Whereas if I'm aware enough and have the ability to kind of create my own story. How do I want to shape this experience? You know, what do I want my story to be? You know, and I think that's how you make your way out. And like, that's what Ben's done, you know, with he's created this story for himself of, I'm going to take this experience that I have and I'm going to help people. You know, I don't know Ben's exact story. He can tell you, but like, that's what I see in his story being. My story is going to be very similar. You know, I think like, you know, like I told you guys in the beginning, like this path that I've taken through baseball is getting me ready for my next chapter, you know, and that's the story I'm telling myself so that I can live with it and keep going. But I think that everyone needs to be cognizant of what story are they telling themselves, and is it helpful? Is it a story that you want to be living? You know?
Yep.
Whoa.
And I'm even refining my story at this stage,
Yeah.
where it's, the athlete complete is a product of my failures as a player, coach, and personal. Well, I'm refining failure. Like that's not the right word to be using. That points it
Mm-hmm.
as such a negative. It is just my experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even this kick on environment that I'm on right now, because it's, I have a interest-based attention system. So like now I'm really interested in the environment factors that set the stage for performance. I created really poor environments for players historically without knowing it. It wasn't for lack of hard work and all that stuff, and I achieved good results with it. But I also had experiences where the results were really, really negative that affected my life and the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
And it had to do with my personal life not being stable and it coming onto the field and all that kind of stuff. And my solution for my mental health was oh, I can control what's going on in the field. So keep up, everybody. And I
Mm-hmm.
tried to bring everyone along and control that situation, and it wasn't good. And now athlete complete is actually a product of massive amounts of reflection. That's what the actual buzzword should be, because I've reflected on my experiences and now I teach about that stuff. And that only comes with enough age and wisdom to do that. But enough reflection to go, yep, I created the problems. Here's why, physiologically, scientifically. Here's how we solve these problems. You're going to make the mistakes even with the information that I give you. That's okay. You're going to refine it and keep reflecting and get better.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only way. It's interesting.
Yeah.
This concept of story is it's fascinating because I think that it can apply to every single person listening, whether you are 17, stud athlete, a coach, a parent, a weekend warrior who has experienced injuries but really loves to stay active. That idea of deciding what your story is and writing it going forward is super profound. I'm just picturing a 44-year-old guy in Philadelphia who is relatively fit and loves to golf and is dealing, sports fan listening right now who has something going on with his shoulder but loves to golf and wants to get out there. And what the thought process can be for that guy to recover from this injury, have the mental wherewithal, and decide where it goes from this point forward, right? What do you want your story to be? Should you take a break off of golf for a little bit because you have that same torque and that shoulder still giving you problems? Probably. Probably. Because if you love doing this and you want to keep doing it, then some adjustments need to be made. And so as I think about this really I mean, this is this is what life is about. This is
Mm-hmm.
what life is about, is crafting this type of story where you're the main character and you are deciding what the next thing happens in the story, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, all the way out through the rest of your life. And I'm curious about what sort of elements both of you guys have for the story going forward, and what helps you stay grounded and present in and intentional with the crafting of that story. Is it values? Is it identity? Is it just sheer piss and vinegar because you want to just continue to perform? Like, I just think this is such a rich place to continue that idea.
Well, you got to look at a couple things too, and yeah, you want to frame your story correctly. Like if I look at James, and I don't mean to speak for you, but I look at the organizations that you played for, and you played for nothing but world-class organizations, and you had a hell of a career, and you achieved all this stuff. I choose to look at it that way versus fragile and injured a lot. Like, and you, again, with the right framing, I played for these organizations. These are the challenges I experienced, and here's what I can teach you about that. Here's the mental challenges I had. Here's what I can teach you about that. And like that's the story that I would stick to if that resonates in my brain. And then you write that down, but it's easy to keep saying that, but you have to rep it out because the emotional side of you is going to go back to the other one.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to catch yourself and go, okay, I'm going to rep out this story until it becomes part of your core, which means core means is Latin from of the heart. That's just how you start to think. And Sean said intentional. It has to be intentional. You have to go write it down, be intentional until it just starts to drift into how you see your being. And that's the tricky part, right? And then, going back to 44-year-old golfer guy, what's the number one thing they say? Like, well, when I was younger, I could do this, and this is how I did it. It's like,
Right.
It's totally okay that you're evolving and changing, and age is a number. There's a chronological age, and then there's a biological age. Those things don't always match up. You need to adapt and refine. You're a wine bottle, baby. You need to like refine what's going on here, and age sweetly and function well versus worrying about what your dipshit version of yourself could do and be fine with when you're a kid. Like, yeah, it was easy back then. Now it's better.
Yeah, maybe
And
you're.
I said that deliberately. It was easy back then, but now it's better.
Yeah. Maybe you can't smash a 300-yard drive anymore. So tighten up your short game, right? Spend more time on the putty green than the tee box.
But maybe you can if you refine how you did stuff.
Yeah. I think the key, like Ben was saying, is like being intentional, because there's going to be things thrown at you in life that continually attack your story. Just because you have the story for you doesn't mean you can predict the future. Like things are going to come flying at you, and you have to have that solid base of like your story and be intentional about it to be able to realize. I read this book a while back by Ryan Holiday. It was The Obstacle is the Way, and being able to.
We said that earlier.
We did. Before we turned the microphones on, we actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. So, the things that happen to you, you need to find your way through them and make those a part of your. Like your story's going to be changing as you go, right? It's not like you just have this one story that you're attached to. Your story's constantly adapting to your environment and what's going on around you, and having a response for the things that happen to you and finding a way through. And I think that's the important part. I think all starts with awareness. I think there's so many people that are just kind of floating through life without any awareness of their mental state, and they're just a product of the things that are happening to them, instead of making the choice about things that are happening to them and
You
choosing.
said a very, very important R word. You said response.
Yeah.
Too many people react,
Yeah.
and they react to that emotional thing, and instead of being able to pause and respond appropriately, so the outcome is better.
Yeah. Responding takes awareness, and being able to kind of remove and step back a little bit and kind of look at everything and then step back in and keep going. I think like we're all so close to our own experiences. It's really hard to take a step back and kind of like have some be objective about your own life and your own experience. It's kind of one of those things where like it's so much easier to give someone else advice, about something
Yeah.
than it is to like give yourself advice about something. You go through the same thing. If it's happening to
Right.
someone else, it's like, oh man, it's okay. You're gonna be fine.
You'll
Like
be
you'll do this, you'll
fine.
do that. But it's really hard to do that for yourself. You know. Um, so like, but we need to. You know,
Yeah.
because we're trying to, I think, make people aware and make it so that, more people can kind of hold you up and stuff like that and help you through things. But like the reality is that life isn't really like that. Like you have to be able to do it for yourself. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do here is help people, but also organizations and kind of make the whole world that way. But like ultimately it comes down to you, and you're the one making your choices, writing your story, reacting
Yep.
to your obstacles, responding to the negative things that happen to you, and keep on going, kind of thing.
I always like to get into the granular details of some of this stuff and the work that I have done in the past with athletes and that I do day in day out with executives in my coaching capacity is what are some of these techniques that we can use to have the wherewithal to center ourselves and respond. And I'm just going to throw a couple out there because I think they're useful because you could say like I'm going to choose to respond rather than react. Well, what the fuck do I do? What's the first thing that I do? Well, breath. Breath is the very first thing that you should focus on in order to center yourself and then be intentional. So there are box breaths, there's the 4-7-8 breath, there's the physiological sigh, which Huberman has been talking about for a long time. So this breath work will help you kind of bring yourself into center. Another thing that you can do is, some of these is sort of energy medicine stuff. There's this thing called tapping, EFT, emotional freedom technique, where you tap on these meridians and recite these things. It's a cadence of reciting, like, even though I've experienced adversity today, I choose to move through that adversity with grace, like something like that, going over and over through these mechanisms that help you get into a place to be able to respond. Some of these mechanisms are also meditation. I mean, it's corny and repetitive to always go back to it, but it works. It works because if you're in fight or flight and you just can't bring yourself back down to this place of present moment to where you can think clearly and fucking get over yourself, meditation works. You know, grounding, putting your bare feet on grass will help you release ions, ground yourself, calm down. There's studies that show this. You know, writing. I'll just keep going because I think this stuff is useful, and people can go Google this or they can reach out to me if they want. You can hypnotize yourself. Self hypnosis. I had a Stanford professor and doctor and researcher come on my other podcast to talk about his app called Reverie. And what Reverie does is it's a hypnosis app. So if you need to get over smoking or get over fear or whatever, you can use applications like Reverie to literally hypnotize yourself to change your state. There's there's so many of these things that are available to us, but a lot of people just like don't know where to start. So they hit the bong or they drink a beer or they go to the club just to kind of like try to get out of their mind a little bit, to try to get out of that state that they're in. And there's just incredible resources for people, journaling like that's it. If you don't love to write and you sit down and you have put pen to paper and you're like, what am I going to write about today? What am I just write that shit down? What am I going to write about today? It will flow from there. So I think it's important. I guess I feel sort of compelled to share some of this stuff because how do you begin the process of responding rather than reacting?
Well, I think James said it earlier is the awareness, right? You have to have a version of awareness of what you're actually doing. Like and what you're actually experiencing, what you're feeling. Because without awareness, then you don't have the ability to pause and then implement some of these things that you need to implement, those things you just suggested, right? And there's a lot of work on addictions and things like that, yeah, there's the behavioral response, but the way to solve the addiction is to go, what is the triggering emotion that's setting you off into that addiction thing? You can't do that without the awareness piece. So to fix the addiction, you don't treat the behavior. You figure out what the emotion is that's setting that off, and that takes sometimes a lot of deep work. Or if you're resilient, sometimes it's being able to pause and sit with the feeling until it passes, and then that trigger goes away. I mean, I know I've done that with certain things that I've struggled with, and it's like, okay, I feel like I want this thing now, so I'm just going to sit with that and see if I still want it after I'm getting done sitting with it. And that seems to sitting with it. The feelings are fleeting. They're just signals, right? And people get really caught up on these signals that your body's putting out. There are nothing more than check engine lights based off historical context or a way that you've trained yourself. And you either like them or you don't like them. And if you don't like them, then it creates an impulsive response. And that's how people end up abusing something or even injuring themselves via too much exercise or whatever else because of these feelings that they don't understand. Pause. Sit with it. If you can't work it out, talk to somebody who can guide you through that, right? And then implement some of these tactics that Sean's talking about. And there's a lot of really cool stuff out there, like you mentioned, that is readily available if you're willing to pause and awareness and do the reps and work on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key part, is people want quick fixes too.
Yeah.
That shit doesn't exist, man.
No, and the quick fixes that you're after just don't work. They're just not effective. You know, it takes intention, it takes time, it takes reps, it takes everything that you've got in order to refocus your attention, and then you decide what you're right, where your story goes from there.
Everything else is going to be short-term alleviations, and that's what drinking is. That's what smoking weed is. That's what all that stuff is. Like, it's a pause from whatever stress you're feeling right now. Even if you're not getting drunk, like, the act of doing it is a indication that I'm not on the clock for whatever stress that is. So, and it's just a dangerous slope to go down, right? You long-term vision, functioning well in society, not functioning happy all the time, because that's not realistic either. But functioning well takes work, and you have to play the long game.
Well, it takes effort. You know, it's not easy, and it takes bravery. You know, because it's hard to sit in a negative emotion and look at it. You know, because I think it's more common, like Ben's saying, to run from it. And what does running from it look like? It looks like drinking, or it looks like smoking weed, or it looks like, you know, whatever else you do to run away from an emotion or a feeling or something you're going through. You know, I think it starts with, like we said, awareness and mindfulness, and what can bring mindfulness is the things that you're talking about. You know, it's the breathing. That's being mindful, and that allows you to have the awareness to see what's really going on, and then you can then choose how you want to respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but most of us are very unaware of what's going on around us because we're not being mindful of what's actually going on within us. You know, we're reacting to what's going on within us instead of responding, which takes mindfulness and awareness.
It's clear to me like this is an untapped market, which is why we're talking, right? This is what we're talking about. This is what is integral into the athlete complete as a whole. Is what tools are you using? What sort of frameworks? What sort of language are you putting around your process as an athlete and as a person? And you can be a really great sports psychologist and specialize in reaching peak performance and miss a whole bunch of other really important things about how you have balance in your life so that you can perform at a higher level. How do you handle injury? How do you handle adversity, loss, fear, tension? Like, how do you quantify it? What do you do with it? What sort of relationships do you need to change or have better boundaries around in order for you to do the thing that you love to do? And you know, I think about some of the people in this space that I think are kind of there. I think of Mike Gervais and his podcast and the work that he does with different individuals and organizations. I have a lot of respect for him, but I don't know that he's necessarily talking very much about allostatic load or, talking about recovering from injury or writing story. I think he does touch on some of that stuff, but I mean, who are some of the people that you guys are aware of that they're on to something, that they're on that level? Crickets.
I don't think, I'm sure there are. But the ability to tie in and maybe hone in on the interconnectedness of the physical and the mental, and then the environment that sets the stage for all that. I don't know if I haven't seen very many people going on that, right? I mean, you got people who are go down the culture side of things. You got people who are physical performance people. You have people who are mental performance. But in reality, all those things need to be aligned for that to work out really well. I mean, imagine, James, if you walked into an organization that you didn't have to navigate the ecosystem and power dynamics there and how all that works. Imagine if that stress was immediately removed from your plate and you're just in a place where you could start to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you shouldn't have to deal with that.
There's got to be, I mean, it's hard to believe, but there's got to be somebody at the Lakers or somebody at Real Madrid that where it's cohesive, where it's integrated, this sort of model. I mean, maybe there's not.
It's interesting. I think that I think this stuff is just starting in sport. I think we're just starting to scratch the surface. I think that teams, at least all I know is Major League Baseball, but teams have sports psychologists. I don't think that every team had a sports psychologist until, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe. And honestly, in most places, they're checking a box, dude. Like, it's just they're checking a box. Do we have a sports psychologist? Yep, check. There's not, and I'm not, talking shit about, the sports psychologists that are on these major league teams. They're all great people, and I think they're very, very knowledgeable. I don't think that they're given the space to do what is really helpful, to players. There's only one team, the Yankees, that I was with, where the sports psychologist actually got to talk to the team as a whole. And guys went in and talked to him. And that was the most involved I've seen a sports psychologist on a team, was with the Yankees. His name's Chad Bowling. He was fantastic. I talked to him there. He was awesome. Helped me a ton while I was there. And he had an office in the locker room, and guys would go in and talk to him before games or whatever, and he was around and he was great. Other teams I've been on, I haven't talked to the sports psychologist much, and I think that guys do, but it was just much more sparing, it seemed. And there wasn't, they never addressed the team, as a whole. And I just don't think that they, I know in Seattle, the guy was kind of handcuffed. He wasn't able to work with players that much, because I think that the acceptance of it, we're also, a lot of these coaches now are players that played in the 70s and 80s, where it was a very different mindset, and they kind of, want that mindset to be today's mindset. They're not, they're kind of stuck in what it was like, how we were successful back then, and it was very different. So I think that the sports psychology piece, the mental health piece of sport is getting there. And I think that it will get there eventually, but it's all we're trying to do is move it along and make people aware. And kind of, I think we're trying to help make that next step, instead of it just being a check the box thing, let's actually let's do something while we're there, instead of just checking a box and being present, and kind of helping guys.
The tricky part, and this is why I've sought out some of the education that I have. And Greg Mack out of Columbus, Ohio, he's the nuclear engineer, and I want to have him on this podcast. And it's the body view. It's what people think this thing is, and to learn how to optimize the body, you need to understand all the dynamic pieces that go into it, and that is the mental, physical, environmental, and all the things that you can come within that historical context. And you got to package it all together and learn how those things all play with each other, and that takes a lot of work, and it's tricky to get that. You're almost looking at social change and dynamic changes within an organization because, well, you have your departments. They want it running their business, running like a business. So you just manage your department, you manage your department, you manage your department, and hopefully it all works together. That's not how this works. These aren't departments. It's this mishmash of stuff, and they all affect each other and they all play off each other. So you have one person in a role who's like, yeah, they're fantastic at the physical side. Cool. You have this sports psychologist. They're fantastic at the sports psychology side. But how do those two things work together? You have a coach over here. Yeah, X's and O's, technical, all that stuff. But how does he play with the physical and the sports psychology side? That's the next evolution. And I know there's a lot of leagues, MLS and NWSL, that are looking at what's the next phase and area of high performance. And it's the holistic wellness piece and how it all integrates.
How much of a I have to imagine that the upcoming sort of athletic generation, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, who are, teenagers coming up, going into college, launching into college as athletes, they have that generation is much different than us, right? Like I had a pager in high school. Right? Like I didn't have a cell phone, that social media didn't exist. Right?
You had a pager with that tracksuit.
Yeah, exactly. I wore it with pride on that front right pocket.
Work in the streets of Edmonds.
You want to page me, bro? I'll call you right back. I'll find a payphone and call you back. And now the psychology around some of these younger athletes that are coming in is a totally different scenario. I'm going to speak out of school, but I think that there's a lot more mental health. Well, statistically, we know that there's a lot more mental health issues. We know that people are anxious and depressed, right? And have body image issues, right? And that sort of mob mentality that happens on social media just takes so much bandwidth for that young brain. So that is going to lead to an additional set of problems to solve and complexities of personality to find tools to help manage and grow, to consider the future of athletics. And it sounds to me like, like James, you just said, the coach skipper on an MLB team right now probably has an old school mentality, probably has talk about your feelings, you don't share, you get the job done, you work your ass off, you get hurt, you rub some dirt on it. And that is not going to work for an 18-year-old who eventually plays in the big leagues. It's just not, right? I mean, I know you guys agree with me.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with that, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ben.
That's starting too young. Right, they're integrating that type of environment now at age 12, 13, where they're specializing it, where these kids are going through puberty, and so their emotional response to this is getting normalized and mapped down way harder during these pubescent years, and that's what's showing up later. Yeah, you have a much younger generation that does not want some of that old school environment. They don't want to tolerate it because they've been in the thick of it for so long. They don't want that, and they're normalizing surviving in it versus thriving in it, which is also just a major problem. They don't respond to the get after their ass thing. They don't do that anymore. Do you know what that reference is from? Dazed and Confused.
Nice.
Nice pull.
Yeah, it was on like their sleeve.
That's right.
Just
I like
FYI. But they don't respond to that stuff anymore. And if we're talking about pro sports, they really don't respond to it. But you talk about normal life and people getting jobs, they're not responding to old school bosses that crack the whip, and like it's just different now, and it's not bad. It's okay. We got to adapt, and things people need to grow. Old school coaches, they played all the time. Like that's what they did. It's like, yeah, you played versus training. Those are two different things for your brain to accept. I mean, the kids are training now. Uh, you talk about what's going on off the field, social media, social life, school. It's crazy. Well, when they go to your sports training 4 nights a week and you're taking time away from them to handle all that stuff, is the environment helping them or hurting them? Because if it's another stressor on top of a stressed out pile of stress, like what are we doing here? And more often than not, coaches aren't creating good environments for them to get a break from their life. They're creating another environment where they don't want to go into it, and it just adds up. It's too much.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that we were talking about stories earlier. I think that you know I didn't get a phone until I was 13, 14, something like that. And I'm sure like that seems young to some people, but now, kids are getting these phones at what, 8, you know,
Yeah.
something like that. And I think that the earlier that you get connected to the world, which is this little, thing in your pocket, the earlier your story is being attacked by random people, the entire world,
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Bingo.
and it's harder when you're young to then respond and write your own story, right? Like when you don't have a phone, it's your friends, it's your family that are helping you, create your story. But when you get influenced by the entire world, that's a lot of negative that comes with. We know what social media is. It's brutal. People are mean. People are hiding behind a screen and pouring negative things into the world. And the earlier you're exposed to that, it's no wonder that kids have anxiety and are depressed and have all these issues. That's I think that's where it comes from. I think that
Imagine what it's doing to their inner voice and their inner monologue. I mean, it's crushing.
100%. It's just you're getting crushed all the time, and they don't have the experience or the maturity to respond to that in a healthy way. You know, um, you're talking to these, let's just take a coach who is, let's say he's 65. Dude didn't get a cell phone until he was in his 20s. Like he wasn't connected to the entire world until he was 20. He was already fully developed. And of course they're going to be able to handle it better. You have more of a base. At 8 years old, you've got no base to build from. So I think that we have to make adjustments to how we're going to help people because the circumstances are completely different. I think that's what I think gets lost on older people and like, oh, what's wrong with these kids? Why can't they just deal with it? Well, let's give you a cell phone at 8 years old, connect you to the world, and see how you end up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think for those older people to understand what it's doing to the brain chemistry of kids, it's like it seems like such an easy thing. Like, well, just put the phone away. It's like they got the hit. Like,
Well, do they put their phone away? No.
no, of course
My
not.
dad's always on his phone or talking to his watch or whatever. Like
Yeah.
But during puberty, I mean, you have to function in society, right? So like technology is part of the deal, right? But some of the stuff the kids are looking at and during puberty, when you get that massive dopamine strike, your brain maps it down so hard and all the contingencies you did to get to that point. So that behavior goes, whew, I'm wired in now. And it's never as good as the first time, right? So you have to keep doing more and you have to do it more frequently and you have to keep going until you're stuck.
Chasing the dopamine dragon.
Yeah,
Yep.
and then what happens as a result of that, your motivation is tanked because you don't do you don't do hard stuff to get your dopamine internally back up. You're getting it externally from this thing that is so readily available. You don't have to do anything. So now you're dormant. What's the solution? Take the phone away or take the social media away. Wait till you're 16. Wait till you're through puberty before you start integrating that stuff in. Put the phone away, go do something hard. And I mean micro progress it because otherwise it's not going to be a sustainable thing. Like parents, we're going to probably go boot camp style. It's like, no, we actually just start with going for a walk, start with whatever. Like start with 5 minutes of solitude practice where you don't have it and you can take note of what you experienced in that. things that you're paying attention to. You got to start repping it out, and change the game a little bit.
Yeah, I think that the reality is, like, kids are going to continue to get phones at a young age. I think that I think that parents are going to have to be more mindful and more aware and be able to lead the way a bit more, like Ben's talking about, like maybe teach awareness, teach mindfulness
Yeah.
to help them deal with
Yes.
how to do this. But that's going to have to happen at a young age, and
For sure.
it's going to take, I think, exactly what we're trying to do is kind of help people create that mindfulness and that awareness,
Well,
to be
one
able
of the
to.
one of the conversations I'm having with the Sounders and the academy setup is clearly educating the parents and the player on the expectations of what it is you're actually doing. What are you doing there? Because the Sounders or any professional academy, the outcomes that you want are different than going and playing for a normal youth club, because at the end of it, they're either going to put you on the first team for the pros, or they're going to try to sell you. You are a revenue piece for them, and that's the reality of the process there. Be clear on it. That's totally cool. As a result of that, you're probably going to get better exposure to colleges and things like that. So yeah, maybe you choose to engage in that process willingly. But the conversation is, be clear with the parents about what it is you're trying to achieve so they can support this. And they need to play a role in it, and they need continuing education on how to handle this too, because they don't get it. They don't know what's going on. Same thing with the phone conversation. Parents need the education too, so they can help support their kid either get out of a situation or learn how to navigate it more effectively from the beginning. Everyone needs education on what is actually happening now. Like, it's the phone, 2012. I've said it before, that hockey stick spike in anxiety, depression globally. We just threw these things out there willy-nilly without understanding what they're actually doing, and now we're understanding some of the repercussions. Like, okay, we need to pause and educate. We need waivers. We need all sorts of stuff in place to start using these things. Otherwise, I mean, we're going down.
Yeah.
We're going down in it.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve Jobs didn't let his kids use tablets and iPads and cell phones. Like, he was real clear about it. He's like, my kids.
It was Zuckerberg.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Some of the things that I'm working on with my kids at 11 and 8 is breath work and meditation.
Yeah.
We do neurofeedback. We find these tools and techniques that will help.
Red light cups.
Red light. I mean, they also do cold plunging, and we've experimented with tapping. And I mean, you kind of have to when your dad's a weird biohacker guy, but. These things are now just sort of part of the routine. Part of the routine is to sit quietly and meditate and follow your breath. It's going to eventually just be as like a counterbalancing measure for when they eventually do get cell phones, like, and I've seen it, and you guys will see it as your kids get a little older. You can tell a YouTube kid pretty quick. You can tell a 10-year-old who has spent 10 hours a week on YouTube for the last 4 years. Like, you can tell there's a glazed look, there's a lack of interaction, and all of this is to build resilient people so that they can handle and manage, so that they can have fun, so they can relax effectively without having to get that dopamine hit of a tablet next to their face. And these are all tools and techniques that also adults, parents, coaches, we all need to set a good example. If your kid's talking to you, put your fucking phone down, talk to them, right? Please, please put your phone down and talk to them. Don't look at your phone around the dinner table. These sorts of simple things that you can do to sort of set that standard. I want to kind of go back to your process, James, a little bit, because I feel like there's still a lot more to kind of unpack. What else are you good at? Like, when like, are you an excellent cook? Are you a grill master? You good at parcheesi or pickleball? Like, what else?
He's got a great beer fridge. He's got.
Yeah, nice.
It might be empty now because
it is empty right now. Probably. Did you finish it off?
James was like, "Can you go up and change my air filters in my house?" Yep.
Just take a sip out of this one and a sip out of that one.
Exactly.
I I just put in my bag and leave.
What am I good at? Like other
Yeah.
than being a baseball player?
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I wouldn't say I can cook. I can follow a recipe, but like I wouldn't say I'm a good cook. I don't know, man. I think this, like I think
Yeah.
talking to people, being there for people, being understanding. I think sharing my experiences, sharing wisdom, is something that I enjoy, and I think that I am good at it. I think that I'm a really good listener. I think that sort of stuff. As far as like other skills, like I wouldn't say I have like another like really good skill, but I'm also, I guess my bar is like being a professional at it. So
Right.
like, I'm not as good as anything that I'm not as good at anything as I am good at playing baseball. Because like I was one of the best in the world for a long time at that. Like there's, I have nothing else like that. But
I bet you're a world class dad.
I do my best. I think we all do, but like I do my best to be a good dad. There's a lot of things that I enjoy, though. That I'm going to get back to, which is the snowboarding and the fishing and I'm going to learn how to golf, stuff like that. But yeah, I think that, like I was saying, I think at the beginning was, I think that baseball has been preparing me for my, I think my true calling, which I think is doing this and like helping people and kind of doing the whole sports psychology piece, having been someone who's lived it, and like been through it personally. I think that I can help a lot of people because of my experience that I've had.
Here,
You're
here.
also you're a great person.
Thank you.
So what is, yeah, I mean, this is such interesting stuff, man. I'm just fascinated by all of this. And going back to, what are we doing here with this podcast? What sort of conversations have we had? And since you've been listening, you've, you've understood the really holistic approach that this podcast is really sort of featuring, which is about life. It's about performance. It's about mental health. Um, it's about having hard conversations to reveal things that are meaningful in our lives that are important to us and how to work through them. And the fact that you had an injury a couple of days ago and just jumped on the mic and are really willing to talk about your process, I think shows so much about who you really are, and working both in this podcast and Athlete Complete, as a mentor, as a coach, as a psychologist. I think that that your future looks so bright, and
Yeah.
you're just there. And I think that whatever it is that you choose to do, you're going to thrive in. I have no doubt in my mind that you're going to be world class in whatever the things are that come up next. And I think everybody that listening is probably agreeing with that. Like, damn, that fucking James Paxton, he's so likable. Like that guy, just listen to this guy. He's just got these silky vocals and just is so thoughtful with everything. So I'm excited for where this goes. And as we continue to have really world class guests on this podcast, we're going to be able to go very deeply into the weeds and some of the stuff that's just so fascinating for us and hopefully for the listeners too. Again, you're listening now wherever you are in the world. We want to know what you want to hear. We want to hear from you, and by now we'll have easy ways to get in contact with me. But who do you want to hear? Like, what sort of guests do you want on this very podcast? Because we want to provide content to you, dear listener, that you want. Maybe it's pro athletes, maybe it's sports psychologists, but it's important for us to continue to cultivate content and guests and conversations that people are really really interested in. I don't know about you guys, but when I tell people about this project, they're like, whoa, what do you, when I explain to them what we're talking about, every single person that I tell about this goes, Oh, that's super interesting. There's nothing like that I've heard. There's no other podcast like that I listen to. I would be super into that. Have you guys gotten some of that same feedback?
Yeah, people want to know how to download it.
Yeah, yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard some of that for sure. I think that I think this is something that really like hasn't been done a lot. I think there's a lot of there's not many spaces where I think people are being like vulnerable about like what actually is going on, and talking about their experiences like this. So I think this is like a really cool place for us to bring people in and for ourselves just to share our life experiences, what we've learn from each other, share some wisdom. And, it's not just about, I was had this thought, it's not just about like the mental health side of things. It's also like for success. I know success is a driver for people. They want success. This stuff can help you have success. Like this, when I learned a lot of these mental skills and stuff like that, it made me a better pitcher. I think it's so funny, man. Like it's so true. Like I wish I knew what I know now when I was 26. If I had that
Yes.
stuff with this mind, it would have been so much fun. And I think I would have been even better. I would have been, yeah, it would have been crazy to be able to have that talent level, that skill, that power with what I have up here now and how I understand myself and the game and what it takes to compete. Like I'm a way better competitor now than I was when I was 26. When I was 26, 27, 28, I was scared out of my mind out there. And it was just flight or whatever it is, fight or flight, you know? And now when I take the mound, it's confidence, it's attack, it's compete, because of the work that I've done with Ben and others to work on my mental side of things. And that gives you such a leg up, like my stuff when I pitched this year was not the same as it's ever been. I wasn't throwing hard, it was completely different, but I was able to have success because of my ability to compete and everything I've learned about myself and my body and the mental side of the game. And that's what I want to share, with people too, is like this mental health thing, like all that also, but like also how do you use your mind to compete better? I think that's something that we can talk about at some point is how does that make you a better competitor and anything, not even just sports, but life, your job, whatever it is. The mind has so much to do with it. And I think it's super underrated. I think that, I was talking to a guy the other day. It's a short story. We were talking about how these teams are so focused on guys that throw hard. They want you to throw 98, 99 now. They don't, 95 isn't that big of a deal anymore. And I was like, I wish they would teach the difference between a guided 95 and an FU, here it is 95. They're very different. And they don't teach that at all. And that right there, that's a difference. That's a difference maker is this. The same pitch, the same speed, but this will change. The way you think about that pitch changes everything. And I don't think people understand that. And that's what I want to teach.
It's the same thing as being the calm guy in a fight versus the guy in the alley throwing haymakers. Like, the calm guy's going to win out, right?
Right. Excellent
Go
point.
into the jiu-jitsu side of things.
It sings to me. It sings to me.
Or who's on defense. The attacker
Yeah.
wins. The defender loses.
Right.
Yeah.
Ooh, baby. Well, we may have just teased the next episode for some of these techniques, some of these strategies that elevate performance. I can't wait. I can't wait. These are such cool conversations. Well, let's wrap it up there. This has been such an incredible conversation again, James. I'll quit blowing smoke up your ass right after this, but the courage, the wherewithal to be able to come in and jump on the mics and have a conversation like this soon, days after an injury that's put you out of the game, is shows such a ton of character, and I cannot wait to continue this conversation next time.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, dudes.
That's a wrap.